Welcome to All About Capital Campaigns, a podcast that provides fuel for your nonprofit's growth. Each week, hosts Andrea Kilstedt and Amy Eisenstein, co-founders of the Capital Campaign Toolkit, provide practical tips about raising more money for your nonprofit organization. The Capital Campaign Toolkit is a support system for nonprofit leaders who are running capital campaigns. At capitalcampaigntoolkit.com, you can download a step-by-step guide for your capital campaign and get many other free resources. This podcast is recorded on a live webinar every Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You can join the live session and get your questions answered by signing up today at toolkittalks.com.
All right, Andrea, what are we talking about today?
Yes, we're talking about one of my very favorite subjects, which is thinking from abundance rather than scarcity. And it's such a fantastic subject, really. It's a great subject personally and in terms of fundraising, because so many of us come to the world, particularly now when we've all lived through COVID, from a place of fear, from a place of needing to hold tight our resources and worry about what the future is going to bring. And what we learn in the fundraising business is that the difference between approaching the world from a place of fear and wanting to hold things, that having a sense that resources are scarce, and having a sense that possibilities are great, is only a flick of an idea. I mean, it sounds as though these things are on radically different sides of a spectrum. But in truth, it doesn't take very much to flip your own mind and the mind of your board members and executive directors from one side of that to the other. And what we know, having been in this business a very long time, is that the best fundraising happens when the organization is thinking from a place of possibilities and abundance. Right? We don't do our best. Donors don't do their best when they are giving their money to help an organization scrape by. Donors do their best and are at their most generous when they see a big picture of a problem they might solve, that they might help you solve. And when they have a sense that the organization really is thinking not about squirreling away their money and holding tight their money, but is thinking about how can we approach our mission? How can we approach the services we provide and think more expansively so we solve a problem? Even if it's going to take us years to do that, let us imagine what it would be to do more and better and help more people. So that's the subject of today's call, thinking from abundance.
Yeah, so I want to just react to something you said, Andrea, in terms of, you used the phrase squirreling away the money. So I think it is important for organizations to have reserve funds. I think donors are happy to support that, and they feel like it's responsible. Responsible, mature organizations do have reserve funds. So I don't want you to hear that phrase and take it the wrong way. What donors don't want to do is save a sinking ship, right? They don't want to put their money into you because you're saying we can't pay our rent or we can't pay our staff or we're going to turn the lights out. Please save us. Because what are you going to do next month? You're going to come back to them and say, oh my gosh, we're in the exact same position. Instead, we want you to go to donors from a place of empowerment and vision and mission and impact and say, help us grow, help us serve the community in powerful ways. We have long waiting lists of people for our services. We want to significantly increase our impact and grow our programs and services. So, give to our big vision. So that's what we're talking about when thinking about abundance. All right. Okay. Andrea,
right.
You're going to give us
Thank you for making that clear, Amy. Yeah. Really, I certainly don't want to give the impression that people should be, spending every penny they have. But
No.
that said, while on one hand, I mean, in some sense, it's part of the challenge is that you need to be able to bifurcate. How's that? I love that word. You have to bifurcate your brain, where part of you is totally behind running an organization that is fiscally responsible. And the other part of you is always saying, if our resources were unlimited, what would that enable us to do? And how can we move towards that? So we need to be able to hold both of those things at the very same time and run responsible organizations while at the same time thinking, gee, are we thinking big enough? Are we taking advantage of the possibilities and the resources that may be there if we just had the courage to reach out and to think that way? So that's the subject. Someone just asked me in the chat what was the title, and I made one up on the spot: Fundraising from a Mindset of Abundance, or something like that.
Yeah, planning from abundance.
Planning from abundance, right?
Right. Our Andrea and I spend a lot of time thinking about what do we want to talk to you about? What are the important themes of the week, the month, the quarter, the year? This quarter, we're going to be touching on themes of getting out of COVID. What's next? What comes next for your organization? So today we're talking about thinking big and planning from abundance and getting out of the scarcity mindset, quite frankly. That's what you're going to read about in a blog post I wrote tomorrow morning. But as I said, we're going to start there. Andrea is going to talk about that and some tools you might use to help your board think about planning from abundance and getting into an abundance mindset for another 5 or 6 minutes. And then we'll turn to any questions. It doesn't have to be on today's topic. So
we already have some good ones, I see. So
go ahead and put.
Renee has just posted something in the chat saying that she's just gone through this culture shift over the past 3 years, and now you have reserves and a vision for a campaign. Renee, if you can easily share in the chat with everyone what your organization did to shift that culture, I'm sure people would be interested in knowing. But let me talk a little about experiences that I've had or ways to build that. First of all, I find that board members and executive directors are actually happy to know that they have permission to think from abundance, which is an interesting notion. I think we get in the frame that you have permission to manage your resources well. But no, people don't often give you permission to spend some period of time really thinking in much bigger ways. So I want you to think about how you might work with your staff, with your development staff, with your board, with your executive director, with the leadership team of your organization, and how you might structure opportunities where you say, today we are going to spend half an hour or however long a period you have, just thinking from abundance. We're not going to worry about whether we have the money today or tomorrow, whether it's realistic today or tomorrow. We're going to think about, well, what might we do if resources were unlimited? And it takes a while for people to sort of give themselves permission. But for example, if you have a group together, you can put them together in groups of 2s or 3s. You can get them to come up with a 3-minute presentation about what they would do if they had unlimited resources to move your mission forward. And then get everyone to give a little talk about it. You can actually give prizes to people who focused on things. You can have fun with it. You can make it feel a little lighter, right? By facilitating the process that way. When I used to work with my old wonderful colleague, Michael Miller, he came up with an exercise that he called the headline exercise, which is in that book, Train Your Board to Raise Money. If you're interested, that Andy Robinson and I put together. It is called Making Headlines. And the gist of it is to have everyone come up with a headline that would describe your organization's accomplishments in 5 years. If you were to wake up and look at a newspaper in 5 years, the biggest newspaper in your town, and the headline were about what your organization had accomplished, only you could not use the name of the organization. So the headline can't be the XYZ organization has become the best of its kind in the country. No. It has to be a record number of girls went from the XYZ program to college over the last 5 years. Or it has to be about your mission and the impact of your mission, not about your organization. It has to be about what your organization has accomplished in 5 years that would actually solve a problem, right? And if you get people thinking about that, and again, you can put them together in groups of 2 or 3 to come up with headlines, and then you can post the headlines on the wall and you can talk about each of them, right? What resonates? How might we think about doing that? How might we invest in making that happen? It just is a starter for a conversation that gets people thinking bigger with a big, hairy, audacious idea. So I will post the name of that book.
I've done it. It's okay.
Oh,
it's not how to train your board. It's just
whatever.
train your board and everyone else to raise money. Okay. So, and while you're thinking about, you often refer to this big picture thinking, Andrea, as blue sky thinking, right? So, and I want to say, if the idea of having a conversation about endless resources seems overwhelming, or, it may sort of stop the conversation because that's too big. You might say, all right, if we had an extra $1 million this year, what could we do? If we had an extra $10 million, what could we do? And if we had unlimited resources, what would we do to accomplish our mission? What's the vision of this organization? So, all right. Should we go to questions?
Let's do that.
All right.
And we can flip-flop back and forth.
Yeah.
Here's a great question. Our anonymous attendee, and I always wonder if it's one anonymous attendee or multiple. It's a question. Here's the question. How best to manage the enthusiasm of volunteers when they want to try to raise a large sum of money for the capital campaign with limited organizational capacity or history to do so? As staff, we want to be positive and encouraging, but we also want to set volunteers up for success. What a helpful and good question. Amy, why don't you take a crack at it?
Yeah, so I think that there is a fine line and a balance between managing enthusiasm of volunteers. You don't want to tell a volunteer who's ready to go out there and start asking that they shouldn't be helping with fundraising because, gosh, wouldn't it be great? Everybody's looking for volunteers who are willing to go out and ask for money. The challenge comes in when there's that they're jumping the gun, right? You haven't done your planning. There's no consistent message. They're asking for things that you either don't want or don't need, or, they're asking for a small amount of money when this particular donor could potentially give a big amount of money. So I think engaging your volunteers in the planning process and making sure that they have a clear sense of what the order and the strategy of a campaign is and why you do things when is critical for success. So, if board members don't understand why it's potentially harmful to go out and start asking before you've planned a campaign, that they might ask somebody for $5,000 who has the potential to give $25,000 or $50,000 or a leadership level gift to your campaign. Why it might be detrimental or damaging to ask for a gift before you've thought through what donor recognition opportunities are or naming opportunities are. So to me, it's not about telling them don't go out and ask. We want them to go out and ask. We want them to participate in the campaign, but it's more about presenting a timeline and a strategy and engaging them so that they understand that there's a time and place for asking and that you're not quite there yet. All right, Andrea, what do you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to build a little on that, because I think that, 9 out of 10 volunteers think that a campaign begins when they go out and ask their rich friends or the rich people in their community whom they don't even know for money. That's what they think the beginning of a campaign is. And of course, those of us who have done this a bunch of times know full well that by the time you're actually going out and asking people with serious resources for money, you have been through a lot. You've done a lot of work to get that organized and to build so that you have a pretty good likelihood of success. Because volunteers don't know, they haven't experienced campaigns, they don't know how to do it, it is your job to make sure that you bring them into the fold, that you, as Amy said, that you involve them in the process of planning the campaign. One of the things that we have all found to be incredibly helpful and really gets people to understand how a campaign works is this amazing, simple, effective tool, which is both the gift range chart and then the depth chart that's connected to it, right? The gift range chart, for those of you who are new to campaigns, I know most of you know this, but it breaks down your goal in reasonable segments, starting with a top gift, and gradually you get more gifts as the giving amount goes down. It's one of these sort of a Pareto principle donor pyramids, if you will. That turns out to be the most remarkable of tools to help your board understand what it is they need to be doing and how the campaign is going to work. And you can use that to say to them, all right, we need to have a strategic order of solicitation where we're going for the largest gift first, and then we're asking people gradually for smaller gifts as we go down. If you begin to inform them, your volunteers, so they begin to understand what the pattern is, they will hold their energy for you. They will still be excited. They will feel more confident, actually, and be ready to get on the page. But because we only do capital campaigns every once, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, most organizations, it's unrealistic to think that your volunteers know. They don't know. They don't understand. And it's not, there's nothing wrong with them that they don't understand. They just haven't done it before.
And the reality is, Andrea, that most nonprofit professionals, executive directors, CEOs, development directors, don't know either, which is why they turn to campaign consultants and us and others in the field. Because really, if you are at a nonprofit, the likelihood is that you may have only been through one campaign or no campaigns or part of a campaign. You haven't led multiple campaigns if you're working full-time for a nonprofit in most cases. And so, you turn to campaign consultants, and that's what we're here for. That's why we're here answering your questions. But I do want to say that if you have a board or volunteers that don't understand the process, we would love to come in and do a training. Of course, we have all sorts of solicitation and board introductory trainings for campaigns to help explain it. And for better or for worse, even if you are an experienced campaign leader, sometimes board members don't listen to in-house staff, as you probably are familiar with. And, they sit up and listen when you bring in a quote unquote outside expert. So
irritating, Amy.
It is, I have development directors tell me all the time, I've said what you said to the board members, but they listen when you say it and they don't listen when I say it. It's totally unfair. But if you're really planning a campaign to raise serious money, you should have a campaign budget, and there should be funds set aside for you to bring in outside help for whatever reason you need it. And one of the things that you may need it for is for board training and for campaign committee volunteer training. Like I said, to help them understand what a campaign is, what their role is, what the strategy is, what the sequencing is. and of course, solicitation training as well. So you can find all of that on our website again at Capital Campaign Toolkit, and we're here to help when you're ready for that.
Amy, I'm struck that this time of year particularly, we are just finishing up one of our mini campaign programs where we work with 8 organizations over a course of 8 weeks. And the promise is that they will be able to raise $100,000 or more in 8 weeks using capital campaign principles. And we've done it now several times, and we're going to have a new program starting in May, but it's always utterly fascinating and heartwarming to me how when you work with a group of people, many of whom are neophyte fundraisers, right, or don't know nothing about capital campaigns, and you move them through this planning process, lo and behold, if they don't raise more money than they ever imagined, and it's not rocket science. There's no magic wand. It's just organizing the work into clear and bite-sized pieces. And we do this in a small campaign over an 8-week period. And people, because it's so short, you can actually see it more clearly, right? You can see that, what are you going to raise money for? All right, what's exciting about what you're going to raise money for? How do you frame the impact of what you're going to do? Where's your gift range chart and your depth chart? I mean, it's miraculous to see it, actually. And I'm just in the process of kind of finishing this up. So it's fresh on my mind. All
right, let me read Chastity's question for you, Andrea. We're about to kick off our public launch of our capital campaign. We also have our annual fundraiser coming up, of course. We're looking for sponsors for the fundraiser as well as donors for the building campaign. When talking to donors, do we ask them to sponsor or be a donor or both at the same time? What do you say, Andrea?
Well, that's a complicated question. So it's a complicated question because organizations do it in different ways. I have worked with organizations where they decided for that particular year, their annual fundraising event, the proceeds of their annual fundraising event were going to go into the campaign. That's one valid way to do it, right? And then these problems that you're facing or these questions become easier because it's all going into the same campaign. But there is absolutely nothing wrong with explaining to people that you have 2 things going on or 3 things going on at the same time and inviting them to make multiple contributions or multiple commitments or letting them decide what they want to do for that particular period of time. Right? I don't have a problem with doing that. Thinking from abundance, I believe people are generous. People want to be generous. If they like your cause, if they are committed to what it is you're doing for some particular reason, they are looking for opportunities and ways to give. Some may prefer giving to a gala. Some may want to sponsor because they want the visibility of that. And some may want to give to all 3. Some may want these are fine conversations to be having with people. But remember that you are wanting to help make it clear for people and to let them do what's going to give them particular pleasure to do. And different people are going to choose different things. So your job is creating the ask in a way that is clear and honest and gets the donor on your side because they want to be on your side. That's why they're a donor. They want to be on your side. They want to help.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I agree with everything you've said, Andrea, and I would always try and do my best to explain to the donor that we really want both gifts this year, right? We want your regular gift to the annual fundraiser, the sponsorship, whatever it is, because that's generally supports our ongoing everyday programs and services, which are continuing throughout this campaign. And on top of that, we're hoping that they would consider a one-time special gift for this special campaign you're doing. One of the ways, of course, it depends on the donor and who you're speaking to and how big of a gift it is, right? But a lot of times we think about gifts to the annual fund as being written out of a checkbook, right? It's somebody can write a check for $100 or $500 or $1,000, and they write it out of cash flow. For a campaign, often, especially with larger gifts, people think about giving from assets because it is a one-time special gift that should last a long time, right? That's why we do these campaigns only every 10 or 15 or 20 years. We might ask them to think about making their regular annual gift to the fundraiser, plus a gift that they might consider making from stock or life insurance or retirement funds or real estate or something, a bigger one-time gift. So, that's not appropriate for every donor, but you might think about speaking that way to your most significant donors.
The other idea here that I think may be useful to people generally when dealing with multiple asks is that you may not make the asks at the same time, right? Maybe there is a different schedule for a variety of reasons. And the phrase that's always stuck with me for situations like that is double mention, double ask. Right. So let's say you're going to be asking someone in a particular period of time for a campaign gift and for a gift to the annual fundraising. Right. Now, you don't want to surprise them in either case. So when you ask for the campaign gift, you want to mention that you hope they will still continue with their annual gift and you will be coming back to them in September or whenever you're going to come back to them to ask for an annual gift. When you ask them for the annual gift in September, you want to recognize that either they have already given a campaign gift and over and above, or you hope by the end of the year they will be making a campaign gift. Right. So this double mention, you're mentioning the other ask in each situation. That's where the phrase double mention, double ask comes from. And it's worth tucking that away in your mind. It's a useful strategy in some circumstances. I'm always struck, Amy, just with my own personal giving. Now, and not, believe me, I know not everyone's like me, but here's how I am, and I'd be interested to know how other people are. I'm amazed at how little I keep track of how much I've given to any one organization. And the reality is that the more they ask me, the more I give. Because I don't remember if I gave last month or the month before or in December or whatever. I don't give that way. I don't have a list that says this is how much money I'm giving to each of these organizations this year. I respond when they ask me, and the better job they do of asking me for something that sounds interesting, the better job I'll do of giving. So yeah. I'd be interested in knowing how those people, how you give, if you think about your own giving, right? Do you give from a list with a prescribed amount of what you're going to give through the whole year? And I know there are some people like that. Or do you respond to asks? And the better the ask, the more you give, right?
And clearly there are both ways. Let us know in the chat box. We'd love to see how you guys as a group think about this.
Amy, how do you do it?
Yeah, I do both, actually. So throughout the year, when there's a compelling ask, I just give. At the end of the year, and, we don't look back and see what we've already given. We come up with an amount and we figure out what the charities are. And as a family, we determine, how much we're giving to each of the charities we love the most. But throughout the year, I sort of just as they come.
Yeah. And you don't then have a list at the end that says, well, we've already given X number of dollars to this charity.
No.
We've already, no. Some people do. And they're perfectly
Some
fine.
people do. But you know what? It is important to acknowledge that because the data does show us that people who give, there are plenty of people who give again and again and again. And that does justify asking periodically
again and again
and again.
It
right? Does.
Exactly.
I mean, everybody's so worried about donor fatigue, but if you ask for a compelling reason, for a compelling thing, you will find that many of your donors give throughout the year. And and just to add on to what you said, Andrea, my guess is that the more personal the ask and the more specific, the more you give. Right? The vaguer the ask and the less personal it is, the less you give, right?
That's
you
right.
Just send $25 or $50, it doesn't matter. But if they ask you for something specific that you care about and tell you this is how much it costs, or this is how much to make the impact, you're going to give more because they've told you that. And that's true, I think, with most donors, right?
Yeah. Now, I do think I'm just responding to this MJ Regoli. I don't know your name. That's what I see here. You say you're surprised. You find it surprising how many people give exactly the same amount each year. And I think there is something to that. I think people do give habitual amounts. And in order to get people off a habitual amount, you need to ask them for something that is not habitual and even highlight that, I know your standard gift is so-and-so. This year we're doing something special. Would you consider giving such and such this year? Now, if somebody comes to me that way, I give $500 easily to a bunch of organizations that I support, right? If they come to me and say, this year, here's what we're doing this year, and it's exciting, and I think you're really going to enjoy this program, would you consider giving $1,000 or $2,500? I actually might do it, but they'd have to do something to make me think about changing my habit. All right.
Let's go to Terry's question here. Terry asks if the volunteer has a line on a significant donor and the window of time may be limited, have them set up a meeting that includes a relevant staff or board member. Oh, Terry, I think you're reacting to the last question that we talked about when we were talking about volunteers going rogue. It wasn't in those terms, but volunteers sort of going out before we're ready. Yes, Terry says yes. Thank you. So, yes, you want to use volunteers in a way that you are going to be successful in fundraising. To me, if there's a limited time or window, you may get what we call in the industry, I don't know if you love this term or hate this term, Andrea, but sort of a go away gift, right? To me, if there's a window, that means the person's not really interested. You have one opportunity to meet with them. You might get a gift. I don't know. I don't see them as being a long-term or significant loyal donor if there's some sort of limited time here, but volunteers are always in a rush, which is good. It helps them stay motivated. I don't know.
Yeah, I think these answers, Amy, that people, these responses that people have been talking about how they give are actually quite interesting because you see what a range there is. And when you think about your donors, you need to remember, right, that everyone gives differently. In fact, it's interesting. It might be interesting. I'm totally making this up on the spot, but it might be interesting for you to call a bunch of donors and say, listen, we're doing a survey to understand how our donors like to give. Would you be willing to share with us, how do you make these decisions? Do you plan at the beginning of the year? Do you have a specific budget? How do you make those decisions? So Pam, hi, Pam Montgomery. I'm going to read yours for the people on our podcast because they can't read the chat here. She says, we give a prescribed amount from our donor advised fund from a list. Then we make a larger gift from our retirement account, usually just to one organization each year. Then whoever asks and moves me, that comes out of our checking account. So there again is the issue of where the money comes from, right? And where the larger amount of money is likely to be. So, and that affects then how you go about talking to a donor, and whether you're talking about a recurring easy gift that comes out of a checkbook, or whether you're talking about something that people would have to think more to take it out of additional resources. I don't think we spend enough time talking about this, Amy.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yvonne is saying, I give to the same organization almost as many times as they ask if the program is close to my heart. However, I find that so few organization asks for gifts on any kind of regular basis. So interesting, Yvonne. Yes. All right.
Amy, this to me raises the question of donor fatigue. We often hear about donor fatigue, right? How many times do you read about or hear about, oh, our donors are getting tired of us. Our donors are getting tired. Our donors are tired. Tell me, when was the last time you felt fatigued giving a gift? Well, you felt fatigued. I can answer that for you. You felt fatigued giving a gift when it was a boring ask and you knew that no one was even thinking about you. They were only thinking about your checkbook, right? That is donor fatigue.
Yeah.
Right now, I actually have a lot of donor fatigue. My husband and I have, for many years now, helped someone who is in and out of prison. Right. This sounds like an unlikely story for you, but we really have done our very best to help him. He has lived a troubled life and he's not related to us in any way, but we've done our best to help him. And I have to say that I get donor fatigue with him because I know that he simply calls when he needs money. And that's donor fatigue. That's the same kind of donor fatigue that when an organization calls because they need money, it makes me tired. When they call because there's something exciting that I would like to participate in or help with, that's not donor fatigue. So this goes back to the initial topic, Amy. You're going to be proud of me that I wrapped all this together. The initial topic of thinking from abundance and thinking about the possibilities as opposed to thinking about need. Right? The reason when my friend calls me, I get so tired is that I don't see an end to his need. Right? I don't see him doing what he needs to do if he's going to be self-sufficient. That makes me tired and always puts me in this quandary of whether I should or shouldn't give. The same is true of organizations. If they come to me asking me to invest in the big difference they are going to make in the world that I happen to care about, I am excited and happy to help them. Well, and then if they report back to me about what difference my gift has made, I'm even more excited to help them the next time around.
I think that is the key, Andrea, because the reality is that lots of the missions and the visions that our organizations are tackling on an annual basis, they're not moving the needle tremendously because these issues are so big. And so, but I think it is critical to show what progress you've made. Right. So you are going to be back to your donors year after year for annual fund for the foreseeable future, because if the problem or the mission that you were trying to solve was easy to solve, we would have done it by now. So the reality is that you are going to be going back to them year after year. It's a matter of, do you have any success stories? What can you show for your work? What progress have you made? It might not be a tremendous amount, I have to admit. So my funny, another story, my college called and said, can you mentor, right, some other alumni from college? I said, sure. So after 6 or 8 months of working with this woman, I don't see any progress. So I said to her, you know what? I always give you to-dos at the end of our calls. We connect 2 weeks later. Nothing's changed. Nothing's happened. I'm getting frustrated. It's probably frustrating for you. I'm not sure this is working. I said, you know what? Why don't you call me again after you've done this one thing? But I don't want to have another meeting until you have. And lo and behold, a month later, she did it. It wasn't a hard task. But after 6 months of not doing it, I sort of said, okay, that's it. So I think it is important to show some progress, to show some, effort, and donors want to see that. And then they will be happy to come back. And I am happy to come back to her after she had even a teeny tiny step in the right direction. I don't know if that was relevant or not. Here we go.
Yeah, it is relevant.
Yeah.
Here's why it's relevant. Because while we think our field is about money, it's really not.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really not. It's about psychology. It's about how people want to do good things and make good things happen in the world. And money is only an exchange. It's not in and of itself, unless you are in the financial industry where your goal is figuring out how much money you can raise. And there are some people for whom money is the point. In our nonprofit world, money is not the point. In our nonprofit world, it is making the world better in some way. That's the point. So I think this is utterly relevant. Let us go to our question here about naming opportunities. This is a lovely problem to have. I just have to ask, just out of curiosity, are you the same anonymous attendee or a different anonymous attendee? So we've run out of naming opportunities at the $10,000 and $25,000 levels. Great problem to have. But we have additional donors giving at those levels. We've been creative about adding more, but we've run out of reasonable options, suggestions, or substitute recognition. So the way many organizations deal with this is that they do it through some kind of a group plaquing program in a very prominent location in the facility, so that people are recognized right at various giving levels. And ideally, you stop having actual spaces named when you no longer have enough spaces to accommodate the number of gifts on your gift range chart, right? This is a slightly complicated question, but a slightly complicated topic. But if you have a gift range chart, your naming opportunities should be developed so that they match the gifts you need. And when you no longer have enough naming opportunities, everyone else goes onto a large public plaque in a visible place in the facility, or some other form of group plaquing. So that's the answer. Remember that naming opportunities is about visibility, right? It's not about purchasing space. It's not about sizes of space. It's about visibility. So people will be happy if their name is in a main lobby of a building, right? Rather than tucked away in a little classroom or exam room or whatever I don't know what your organization is, so I can't get that right. But there is something about naming opportunities in lobbies that are worth doing. And Amy, sometime you and I should do a session on lobby, creative ways to do naming opportunities, because it is a wonderful topic, actually.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm reading this question again, and I think, in advance, you can plan that. It seems to me that our question asker is running into trouble because they have some existing naming opportunities at those levels, and now they don't have any more. So what are they to do? And I think that the answer is, the good news is we've had so many donors at this level that we're now creating a group plaque, and that there aren't any more naming opportunities. If you plan it out in advance, and I don't know exactly what the situation is here, you would stop when you get to a certain level where you don't have any more rooms to name, and then everybody would go on the group plaque. I fear that in this particular situation, you've sort of run into it in the middle of your campaign. All right. Yes. So Diana, thank you. Bring us back to abundance and scarcity. That's what we want to talk about for the next 10 minutes as we start to wrap up. So why don't we turn to the folks in the chat group, in the chat box, and ask, how do you think about abundance? What is your organization doing to plan for abundance? Or, are you stuck in a scarcity mindset? And I think sort of to get us going, we do have a problem sector wide in that we are called the not-for-profit sector. And, we do, I think a lot of people come from a mindset of scarcity, that we are, that a lot of the issues that you're dealing with are scarcity based, poverty and lack. And so how do we turn the switch and think about abundance and thinking about growth? And I'd love to see what you have to say there's a lot of chat coming in. Okay, so lots of votes for us doing a session on naming opportunities. Great.
Be fun.
Yep. Okay. All right. Okay. So sorry, just being distracted here, reading the chat. I think mostly it's about naming opportunities and other things.
So let's think about abundance for a minute. It's I think what I've learned over many years in this business is that organizations take on the coloration of whoever is leading them. And by that, I mean the mindset, right? And all of us have particular patterns and habits in which we think. Some of us function in ways that make us more risk averse, right? Some of us function in ways that we are driven by big ideas and then let other people fill in down below, right? We all have patterns. And when you look at an organization that runs well, and actually I think Amy and I fit together this way, you have people who have different strengths, who have different patterns. I love to think about big ideas. I am an abundance thinker by nature. I was born that way, right? I'm not going to get to be a budget-minded person no matter what I do. Not that I'm stupid about it, but it just doesn't interest me. Amy, on the other hand, is utterly brilliant at taking an idea and making it happen, paying attention to the budget side of things, paying attention to the business side. Together, we are a first-rate team because we cover that frame. If you look at your organization, right, your executive director, your board chair, you're the key people in your organization, and you look seriously at who they are, and then you have a conversation about that to say, here's our organization is shaped this way. I wonder if we could find and take a moment where we think differently. Doesn't mean we're going to all of a sudden unleash the waters, right? We're just, there's nothing like actually talking about what is, about saying, our organization is so powerful and strong because we are so fiscally responsible. But sometimes we should imbue in that an opportunity to think about, if money were no object, what would we do?
I love hearing you describe us that way, Andrea, because I think that points to the fact that there's a spectrum. And I want to read Linda's comment in just a second. So with me and my husband, we would say that he always worries about money and I never worry about money. And so to hear you say that I'm the one who is, worried about money and thinking about what can we afford, what can we not afford is hilarious and true. But that means that there's such a spectrum. And Linda's writing, this is so timely. I just felt the new executive director was thinking too big. And she's doing exactly what you suggest, thinking about what could be done with more revenue. And so I think beautiful. You have people along the spectrum of visionaries and dreamers and those that are more fiscally responsible. And what if everybody took one step towards a vision, right? From wherever they are. You're not going to take anybody who's totally worried about money and get them to say, forget it. I'm completely not worried about money. But what if for a day or an hour, everybody could step one or two places to the left on the spectrum of, let's vision bigger. Let's think the money's going to come. Let's plan for the money to come. And then we'll figure out how to get it. Right? If we have a big vision and we have a big plan, right? I mean, there's something to that movie with Kevin Costner, right? If you build it, they will come, right? I mean, we have to build the vision in order to even see those donors, right? They might be all around you, but you can't see them if you only think there are people around you. Yes, Field of Dreams, right, Donna? Thank you. you can't see the big donors in your community if you're only looking for $100 donations. Once you start looking for $50,000 donations and $1 million ideas, you're going to start talking to people about those ideas who will say, oh, yes, you have to talk to this person and you need to talk to that person. So, I would say, you're going to start attracting those people to you. Some of you are going to roll your eyes and think I'm ridiculous. But to me, when you start having those big visions, those plans, those pieces start to fall into place. You start to hear about things. You start to notice things. They say when you start thinking about buying a car and you want to buy a Honda Civic, then all of a sudden, all you see is Honda Civics on the road because you're thinking about them. You're looking for them. You're noticing them. Honestly, the same thing is true with fundraising. Is once you have a bigger idea, once you have a bigger vision, then you start to figure out what are the puzzle pieces that go into making this happen. If you think from scarcity, then all you're going to see around you is scarcity. So,
Amy, I totally agree with you. We imagine the world in which we live. We imagine it into existence in some very real way. I want to address Diana's comment here because I think it's so important. First of all, Diana, you're a board member, and I so appreciate your being on this call. She says, as a board member, I struggle with our staff not wanting to take chances and a weak chair who doesn't challenge them. So you're in a complicated spot, Diana, and it's actually one of the reasons I don't serve on boards because of that exact complicated spot that you are one board member of many. And the question is, how can you make a change and a difference in your organization from that particular spot? So I first of all, I want to encourage you to get hold of Simone Joyau's book. Simone Joyaux, Joyaux, I think, and it's called something like, I don't know, How to Fire Bad Fundraisers and Bad Board Members. She's written a book on boards, which has a funny name.
You can fire your board members. Yes.
What is it? Something like that. Something like that. So see if you can take a look for her book. You might find it useful. But more than that, as an individual, you can advocate for a group process. Right? The way around your board chair is to see if you can get the board to want to do a training or to bring in some kind of a facilitator to help with planning. You, as an individual board member, have the ability to get board members together to say, why don't we actually go through some kind of a training or a board process that will then take your weak chair and position that chair in a larger circumstance that might provide the context for change. So that's my hats off to you. Being a really good board member is hard. And because you get leadership that may or may not be strong or good leadership. So my hats off to you. You can make change. You just have to be very clever about it and see if you here, I found Simone's book on my bookshelf. It is called Firing Lousy Board Members and Helping Others Succeed. And I've always thought it was actually a pretty good book. It's a quick read. I think I actually wrote the introduction to it some years ago, but it's worth reading, actually.
Excellent. All right. I think that's a perfect note to wrap up on, Andrea. Wonderful. All right. So that's your homework assignment for the week, everybody. Think about abundance. Think about how you can grow your vision and speak with your board members. Plan a blue sky visioning session, whether it's for 30 minutes or an hour. If you want our help, we would love to plan a board training with you, a solicitation training, or a thinking big, thinking from abundance training with your board members. So yes, Andrea.
Patricia, you should sign up you should get in touch with us directly. We don't have the time to answer your question here. But why don't you send one of us an email and we can help. Maybe we can send you in the right direction.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody. Bye, Amy.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining Amy and Andrea for today's All About Capital Campaigns. To learn more about them and their work together, go to capitalcampaigntoolkit.com.